Have you ever cared about someone so much that you forgot yourself, only to end up disappearing from their world as if you never existed? Have you ever sent long messages only to receive nothing but a hollow scene? This story is for you. Not to blame anyone, not to reopen old wounds, but to remind you, sometimes the very moment you stop chasing is when you finally begin to be seen. This isn't a story about winning in love. It's the journey of someone who learned how to be silent at the right time, to reclaim their worth in a world that's far too loud and filled with mixed signals. Stay until the end if you've ever seen yourself as Caleb, or if once you were Jessica. Part 1. Silence awakens curiosity. Silence, the wordless language, holds a power that flowery words could never match. In a world where people are constantly sending signals, stories, images, and invitations, silence stands out like a strange vacuum, making those accustomed to your presence feel unsettled. Caleb disappeared from the daily messages like a lamp suddenly snuffed out in the night. Jessica, who had grown used to his quiet presence, began to feel the void. At first she just shrugged. He must be busy, she told herself. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The messages wishing her a good day suddenly stopped. No more smiley faces, no more short stories about everyday life. The absence wasn't just the lack of a message. It created an invisible space, an open question that no one answered. Jessica scrolled through Facebook, scanning every status Caleb posted. A photo of Caleb smiling brightly with friends. A vague quote. Some doors only open to those brave enough to knock. She browsed Instagram, a photo of the sunset sky. No caption, just silent colors, but containing more than any words Caleb had ever spoken. Questions began to sprout in Jessica's mind. What is he thinking? Does he still care? Has he already forgotten about me? Or have I lost something without even realizing it? The irony was, when Caleb was still there, sending daily messages, always ready to listen, Jessica never bothered to think that much. The ease made her take it for granted. It was the absence that made everything seem important. It was the silence that echoed louder than any sound. Jessica began to scrutinize every little detail. Why was Caleb posting less? Why did he seem happier? Could it be that there was someone else now? Curiosity turned into confusion. Confusion gradually transformed into a vague uneasiness. From being in control of the relationship, Jessica now felt the balance shifting, and it unsettled her more than she had ever expected. A hidden truth surfaced. In human relationships, what haunts us the most is not a direct rejection, but a silence without explanation. Because silence forces people to search for their own answers. And imagination, when unbound, always creates the scenarios that trouble us the most. Caleb did not send any more words. He didn't have to pretend to be busy, didn't have to show off anything. He simply lived, worked, met friends, played basketball every Sunday afternoon, laughed as if his world no longer revolved around Jessica. And it was precisely that normalcy, quiet and unpretentious, that rang the loudest alarm in her heart. Jessica began to feel the emptiness. Not because she loved Caleb deeply, but because she was used to being cared for. Used to the feeling that somewhere out there was someone waiting for her messages, noticing even the smallest changes in her mood. Now that person was no longer there, and in that absence, Caleb's value was slowly defined. Not by the words he had spoken, but by the silence he steadfastly maintained. True attraction does not come from what we display before others, but from what others cannot grasp. Caleb, once predictable, now became a mystery. And in a world full of repetition, mysteries are always what haunt people the most. Part 2. When the message doesn't come and reactions are triggered. Uncertainty, more than anything else, is the fire that fuels the imagination. Throughout an entire week, Jessica waited. She thought maybe Caleb was just busy, or maybe he was intentionally testing her a little. 1 day passed, then 2, then 5. Caleb's silence was not childish sulking, nor was it some strategic game. It was the silence of someone who had truly let go, in peace. Jessica felt herself being pushed to the margins, a feeling she was not familiar with. The evenings spent absent-mindedly scrolling through social media had now turned into a journey of searching for every little trace of Caleb's life. Photos, stories, random comments from his friends, all became material for her imagination. In that moment of absence, Jessica realized he truly could live without her. His life didn't stop just because she stopped responding. And that, more than any word, struck at her hidden pride. Late one night, after many rounds of scrolling back and forth through Caleb's page, Jessica couldn't hold back anymore. She typed a simple message. "How have you been lately?" No emoji, no embellishment. A short line of text, but carrying within it a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, curiosity, and a faint worry that perhaps she had truly lost him. But Caleb, the one who once lit up at any signal from Jessica, was now different. He read the message, seen, and then simply closed his laptop, put on his jacket, and headed out to join his Friday night basketball game with friends, as if that message had never existed. He didn't rush to reply. He didn't scramble to grab hold of the thin thread Jessica had just thrown out, because he had understood one thing. Someone who truly values you will not leave you guessing. Someone who truly wants you in their life will not send half-hearted signals. Caleb wasn't angry, nor was he bitter. He simply chose not to react. And through that calmness, he changed the entire dynamic. From someone who used to chase, to wait, to hope, he became the anchor Jessica would now have to strive to reach if she wanted to. In every emotional game, the one who does not react is always the one holding the advantage. Not because they play better, but because they no longer need to win to affirm their own worth. Jessica, who once thought she could return at any time, began to feel a vague fear. Fear that this time, Caleb would no longer be there. Fear that the opportunity had passed without her realizing it. In the following days, she posted more stories, intentionally making sure they would appear in Caleb's view. Laughing photos, philosophical quotes about living for oneself, letting go of what no longer serves you. All were subtle signals wrapped in a fragile hope that Caleb would react. But Caleb didn't comment, didn't message. His calmness, silent yet steadfast, was the strongest response. A response to Jessica herself, and a response to Caleb himself that he no longer needed to chase uncertainty. There are moments in life when you don't need to do anything at all. Doing nothing becomes the most powerful action. Caleb chose silence not to punish. He chose silence because he deserved something clearer, something more sincere. And in that silence, he not only regained his value in Jessica's eyes, but he also rediscovered his own worth. Part 3. The power of non-reaction. In the days that followed, Jessica's social media became more active than ever. Photos of her beaming alongside friends, weekend getaway trips, cryptic quotes. Live fully, love fully. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Let go to find yourself. Those on the outside might think Jessica was living her freest, most vibrant days. But Caleb understood deeply that the more someone needed to prove, the less they had truly let go. Because those who are truly at peace don't need to shout that they're okay. Those who are truly happy don't need to prove it through every photo or every quote. Caleb saw these updates and simply smiled. No anger, no bitterness, no heartbreak, just a gentle quietness, as if he were watching someone still wrestling with her own emotions, while he had already chosen to leave that battlefield. Because sometimes strength isn't about winning against others. It's about no longer needing to be part of the fight. When Caleb stopped reacting, he didn't just regain his own peace. He also unintentionally lit a spark of curiosity, a void in Jessica's mind, where silent questions began to grow each day. Does he still care? Is he still watching me? Why is he so silent? But Caleb understood more deeply than ever. True attraction doesn't lie in proving you're worthy to someone. It lies in living a life that needs no proof at all. A truly mature man doesn't need others to validate his worth through likes, responses, or admiring glances. He finds that worth within self-mastery, within simple joys, within owning his emotions, without needing anyone's permission. The more Jessica tried to create the image of a girl who was fine, the further Caleb drifted from that picture. Not because he looked down on her, but because he had learned an important lesson. You cannot find true love in a place where you have to fight to prove your worth. Caleb continued with his life, focusing on his work, sports, and healthy relationships. He didn't forbid his heart from feeling, but he no longer allowed his emotions to control him as they once had. His non-reaction, quiet, effortless, became the strongest presence of all. Somewhere deep down, Jessica felt it. And even though she tried to act like she didn't care, in her quietest moments, when there were no more social media distractions, no crowds around, she had to admit, the only person she was hoping for a reaction from was the one who had chosen silence. In a world full of noise and an overflow of half-hearted emotions, it is steadfast silence that becomes the loudest voice. And sometimes, the greatest lesson one can learn in love is not how to win someone over, but how to let go the right way in order to keep oneself. Part 4, the script when she comes back. One late weekend afternoon, just as Caleb finished a basketball game with his friends, his phone buzzed with a small notification. Jessica had commented under a photo he had just posted, a simple picture of Caleb smiling on a country road bathed in golden sunset light. The comment had only 4 words, "You look amazing," accompanied by a smiling emoji. For many, this might have seemed like a victory signal, a reason to celebrate, an excuse to message back, to restart the conversation. But Caleb now was no longer the Caleb of the past. He looked at that comment the way an observer watches a cloud drift across the sky, acknowledging it, but not allowing it to disturb his inner peace. Because now he understood. Someone who has truly moved on doesn't need to seek attention. And someone who truly cherishes you won't just leave half-hearted signals. And a heart that truly leans toward you will not make you guess. Jessica had come back, but not with an open heart. Not with sincere conversation, just with a casual comment like tossing a pebble onto a still lake to see if it still ripples. Not every return is a sign of regret. Sometimes it's just a habit of wanting to confirm, I still have an effect. An unconscious psychological game, not out of love, but out of ego. Caleb didn't blame Jessica. He understood that everyone has moments of weakness, fleeting desires to feel important to someone. But he also knew he was no longer someone meant to fill those temporary voids. He gave a soft smile without replying to the comment. No follow-up message. No reaching out like before. Because maturity sometimes doesn't lie in silent revenge, but in the deep understanding that not every call needs to be answered. Jessica might continue trying, posting more cryptic stories, liking Caleb's old photos. Or she might disappear again when she realized the game had no opponent anymore. Either way, Caleb no longer placed his heart on the board, no longer caught in loops of hope and disappointment, no longer allowing his emotions to be steered by vague signals. Because a truly strong man does not measure his worth by who comes or who goes. He measures it by holding on to his dignity, regardless of the silence or noise around him. Caleb continued walking on his own path, without looking back, without regret. Not out of pride nor out of coldness, but because he understood, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is not to step back toward those who only return to check if you're still waiting. And within that peace, Caleb realized something profound. When you are strong enough not to react, you are also strong enough to love truly. To love without begging, to love without fearing loss. Part 5. Don't reopen a closed door. If Caleb, moved by a moment of emotion, had rushed to open his arms and welcome Jessica back as if the distance had never existed, what would have happened? He would have repeated the same old cycle, being taken for granted. Not because Jessica was a bad person, but because human nature tends to undervalue what comes too easily. A heart that had once been forgotten, if it welcomed someone back without any standards or boundaries, would only reinforce the belief, I can leave, and they will always be there waiting. Caleb understood that. He understood that a man's strength isn't shown by how easily he forgives, nor by loudly declaring, I don't need you anymore. It is shown in the quiet establishment of boundaries, boundaries that need no announcement, only a life lived according to them. Because forgiveness does not mean allowing someone to repeat the same actions. And kindness does not mean losing self-respect. Caleb knew not every return deserves a welcome. Not every attempt to reconnect is a sign of sincere regret. And not everyone who turns back truly wishes to walk the road ahead with you. A door that has been closed does not always need to be reopened. Because sometimes a door is closed not out of hatred, but out of a need for peace. Jessica, no matter how proactive she became, no matter how many vague signals she sent, no longer had the power to pull Caleb back to where he used to be, because Caleb had changed. He was no longer the young man who needed someone else to feel complete, no longer someone who measured his worth by others' attention. A mature man learns to hold his heart in the palm of his own hand, ready to love, but never begging to be loved. He is ready to forgive. He is ready to open his heart, but only to those who truly deserve it, those sincere enough not to turn love into a game, not to use affection as a test for their ego. If someone comes back just to check whether you're still waiting, if someone returns only because they miss the familiar attention, then that return does not need to be celebrated with flowers and fireworks. It should only be received with silence and a quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson learned, for the growth achieved, for the freedom won. Caleb chose to maintain his boundaries, not because he was bitter, not because he was arrogant, but because he understood. It is in consciously protecting your heart that you lay the foundation for deeper, more genuine love, for yourself and for someone truly worthy. You can be kind without being weak. You can forgive without going back. You can love someone and still walk away out of a greater love for yourself. Caleb smiled softly as he looked at the old comment. He didn't need to delete it, didn't need to reply, didn't need to create any drama. He only needed to continue living in the way he knew was right. And by doing so, he not only protected himself from falling into an old emotional loop, he also opened the door for something new, for more mature, sincere, and worthy relationships. Because sometimes, the only way to walk toward happiness is to have the courage not to reopen doors that were meant to stay closed. Part 6. You are your own value. There is a truth few dare to admit. A woman only truly forgets you when her heart finds a deeper connection, a bond that sometimes one encounters only once in a lifetime. Not fleeting adventures, not transient relationships, but a true meeting where one soul sees into another. If that hasn't happened, you still live in her memory, even if not in every heartbeat. Even if she appears busy, even if her social media is flooded with new pictures, even if there are other men by her side, the truth remains. You cannot be replaced by mere temporary noise. But Caleb now no longer needed to cling to that hope. He no longer needed to ask himself, does she still think of me? Do I still matter to her? Because he had understood something far deeper. His value was not in someone else's hands. It lay in the way he stood tall, even when there was no one beside him. No love, no matter how deep, could replace self-respect. No validation, no matter how sweet, could compensate for a heart that had abandoned itself just to be accepted. Caleb had traveled a long road to arrive at this place, a place where peace came not from having someone, but from no longer needing someone to feel complete. He didn't hate Jessica, He didn't hope she would suffer to prove that he once mattered. He simply let her go. And more importantly, he set himself free. Free from unanswered questions. Free from unmet expectations. Free from the need to be seen, to be chosen. Because a man who knows his worth doesn't need to be chosen. He chooses himself every single day. Caleb continued living, waking up each morning with gratitude for another day of life, going to the park in the late afternoons to shoot a few hoops, just to feel the vitality in his body, reading a few pages each evening, not to flaunt knowledge, but simply because he loved the quietness knowledge brought. No one witnessed that journey. No one applauded. No one cheered. But Caleb knew true growth always happens in silence. And the greatest victories are always the victories over oneself. Perhaps one day, Jessica would truly find someone who stirred her heart more deeply, and Caleb would simply smile and wish her well, without a trace of bitterness. Or perhaps she never would. Either way, it no longer mattered, because Caleb no longer lived to prove anything to anyone. He no longer measured his worth by the presence or absence of any person in his life. He was value, because he chose himself, with everything he had become. And that is a gift no one could ever take away. Final words. Not everyone who comes back deserves to be welcomed. Not everyone who remains silent is the one who lost. Some values only reveal themselves when you stop trying to be seen. True maturity is not about holding on to someone, but about holding on to yourself, even in loneliness. You don't need to be chosen to be valuable. You are valuable from the moment you chose to stand tall, even when no one stood beside you.